an actual plea entered on this case or not?
There
Yes.
was in front of Judge Angelini.
All right. And the reason why I say that is because it doesn't say how the defendant pled. So did he enter a plea of no contest or guilty or what? All right, we're going to go on the record. The court is calling 2023 CR 5683 State of Texas versus Alvin James Mendoza. Could I have parties announced for the record for the state?
Miranda Correa of the state of Texas.
Defense?
Defendant maybe for the defendant, Your Honor.
All right, and are you Mr. Mendoza?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you entered a plea of no contest on October 19th. According to the plea bargain agreement, punishment is to be assessed at a cap of 7 years. The state is proceeding on counts 1 through 3. They waived count 4. The fine is to be assessed at $1,000. The state is opposing your application, and there's to be Chapter 62 compliance. Have both parties had a chance to review the PSI report, state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, Judge, I have.
Any objections to the PSI report, state?
No, Your Honor.
Defense?
The only thing I would say, Judge, is he's also eligible for deferred adjudication. I saw that probation said he would be eligible for probation. I'll be asking for deferred.
Okay. Any witnesses, state?
No, Your Honor, just argument.
Defense?
Just the defendant, Your Honor.
All right. Could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand, and if you'll state your name for the record, please.
Alvin James Mendoza.
All right. Defense?
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Mendoza, before we discuss other factors in your life and your childhood, do you take full responsibility for what you've been charged with here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any excuse for your actions?
No, sir, there is no excuse.
Okay. You apologize to this court, and did you at the time to the investigators when you were arrested?
Yes, sir, I apologize to all the victims included in my case.
Okay, so you're aware that this is
I'm
not-
sorry, he said including,
Oh, and all the victims included in my case.
okay.
Okay, so you are aware that this is not a victimless crime, even though some people might try to view it that way. You understand that it's not.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to discuss your childhood. So who did you grow up with in your household?
My mom and partially my stepdad.
Okay. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, sir, I have one brother and one sister.
Okay. And are you the oldest?
Yes, sir.
And your mother, she's now deceased, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How old were you when she died?
I was 14.
You were 14 years old when she died?
Yes, sir.
And did you know your biological father at all?
No, sir.
Okay, when did your stepdad come into your life?
Roughly when I was about, I'd say maybe 3 or 4.
Okay, and then were you, before you were arrested, were you in contact with him, or had that kind of dropped off?
Drop box.
Okay, so you were no longer in contact with him.
Yes, sir.
Did anything happen to you when you were a child? Were you abused?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Without getting into specifics, how old were you when that started?
Age 9.
Okay. So you were 9 years old. Do you remember what grade you were in?
4th, 5th grade, maybe in between, sir.
And how long did that continue?
So I was 11.
Okay. Who was the person that perpetrated that abuse?
My stepfather's brother.
Okay. And just generally, was that sexual abuse?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How did it end? Like, how did that come to an end?
Oh, this courtroom scene is a wild mix of legal technicalities, awkward confessions, and last-minute plea bargaining gymnastics. First, the defense tries the classic, but he's eligible for probation move, while the judge is just trying to figure out if this guy even properly entered a plea or if we're all just wasting time. Then comes the big moment. Full responsibility is admitted, but not before a tragic backstory is unpacked like we're watching a courtroom drama special. The prosecution makes sure to hammer in that this isn't a victimless crime, while the defense lawyer awkwardly tries to humanize the situation. Meanwhile, the judge is probably sitting there thinking, great, another session where I have to hear life stories that should have been told to a therapist, not in front of a sentencing hearing. Classic courtroom chaos at its finest.
stop happening?
My mother got in contact with my stepdad and his brother, and came to an agreement that he would never step foot near us again.
So do you know if it was ever reported to the police?
So not to my knowledge.
Okay, so you never talked to a police officer or investigator or anything like that when you were a kid?
No, sir.
Okay. Were you ever able to go to therapy or see a counselor for that?
No, sir. Apart from the school counselor,
And when you say apart from the school counselor, how did that come?
I had spoken to my school counselor when I was in middle school, and it didn't have a positive outcome. This was after my mom had passed away when I was after roughly about maybe 6 months, and the outcome was that there was a child protective services case opened, and my uncle got involved, and he did not have a positive outlook after that. By uncle, I mean my mom's brother.
Was he actually upset that you had said something?
Yes.
And why was he upset?
He was upset because it endangered it had opened up a case and endangered him with his son.
Okay, so basically he was investigated for neglectful supervision. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. So the first time you tell anybody other than your mother about this, it's a very poor reaction and nothing really comes about. Is that fair to say? Now, how old were you when you first searched for pornography?
11 years old.
Okay. And you would agree that that was well before you were mature enough or ready to understand what that was all about.
Yes.
And do you believe that that came about at an earlier age due to the abuse that you suffered?
Yes.
Okay. And so you've never really had a chance to process what happened to you with any counseling or therapy to this day. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so after your mother died, what was your living situation?
I had lived with my uncle, my mom's brother, and after it was born, more or less a downward spiral of things. We had no utilities at point at some points, and my mind was more on financial rather than going to school.
Okay, did you start working?
Yes, sir. I started working at 16.
And where did you work?
Restaurants.
And is that before your arrest, were you working in a restaurant as well?
Yes, sir.
So basically from age 16 to before you were arrested, you were working in restaurants.
Yes, sir.
And was your salary essentially going to help with the household and utilities and bills for you and your brothers and sisters and the living situation? So the money you were making was not just for you to do whatever to support your family. Still in mind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. If the judge were to give you some form of community supervision, meaning probation or deferred adjudication, would you be willing to do any counseling, therapy, or other conditions that Judge Boyd requires us to do?
Yes, sir. I would be willingly to be able to follow all of those any stipulations that I'm given regarding counseling classes or
And community service or
community services.
anything else?
Yes, sir.
And you would agree to any restrictions on any sort of devices or electronics, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Fully.
And you actually indicated to me that you wanted therapy, you wanted some sort of somebody to talk to because you've never had a chance to process what happened to you. Is that fair to say? Okay. And what if you were to get deferred adjudication or probation? What plans do you have in the future?
My plans are to get a small business degree and open up a food shop and also become a culinary expert.
And now, after you were arrested, you were interviewed by law enforcement, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you cooperated with them fully. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And you gave them the details of your online accounts so that they could assume your online identity. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the purpose of that was to grant them access so that they could investigate anyone who was distributing or possessing child pornography. Is that correct?
The courtroom discussion continues with deeper questioning about past trauma and its long-term impact. The defense probes into the nature of childhood abuse, revealing that while it was never reported to the police, a school counselor's involvement led to a CPS case that only resulted in more complications. A history of early exposure to pornography is linked to the abuse, reinforcing a pattern of unresolved trauma. The defendant describes a life of financial struggles after his mother's death, working in restaurants to support his family instead of focusing on education. When asked about future plans, he expresses a desire for therapy and a career in the culinary field, hoping to turn his life around. The defense also highlights his cooperation with law enforcement, including granting access to his online accounts to aid in investigations, in an apparent effort to present him as remorseful and willing to reform.
Briefly on.
Yes.
Mr. Mendoza, how old are you today?
I'm 22 years old.
So is it fair to say that although you may have not had a full understanding of what you were looking at when you started looking at this type of material at 11, at some point you knew that you were looking at something you shouldn't have been looking at, correct? And unfortunately, it sounds like you have firsthand knowledge of what these children you were looking at were going through. Is that right? And even still, you not only viewed these images or searched for these images, you were sharing these images and trading them. Is that right? Did the PSI say that you've had a fiance? How old is she?
She's 17.
She's 17. So she's underage currently. Is that right?
I would object, Judge, to that question. 17s.
All right, 17 is the age of consent, so.
When did you begin dating her?
Roughly about a year ago.
Okay, she was 16 and you were 21, more or less. Is it?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have any further questions, Jen.
All right,
Just,
any follow-up?
just a bit of clarification, Judge. Where does your girlfriend live, her fiance?
New Mexico.
Okay. And how many times have you been out to see her?
Once.
Just once. Okay. And were her parents aware of this the entire time?
Yes, sir.
They actually chaperoned you when you went to visit her, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Fully supervised.
And so they were with you at all times, and at no point were you alone with her, is that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they actually approve of your relationship, isn't that true?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At no point did they ever say, hey, you don't want you around our daughter or anything like that.
So they're not, you know.
Okay, so with full knowledge, they accept you.
Yes, sir.
And even her parents have kept in contact with you since your incarceration. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
That's it.
I have no further questions, Jen.
How did you meet her?
I met her online.
Okay. No, any other follow-up?
Argument now.
All right, court will hear argument. State, what are you requesting?
Judge, the state is requesting that you meet the cap of 7 years in this case. To point out a couple of things, the defendant was already given the benefit of some waived counts, and as well as, the cap and the ability to apply. Having reviewed the PSI report, although Mr. Mendoza does today apologize for what he did and state that he takes responsibility, it doesn't appear to me that full responsibility was taken. It sounds as though he would like to blame outside influences on why he did what he did. However, as you can see from the discovery and from the testimony, this was not just some searching of images or some viewing of images. It was storing of images, it was uploading of images, and it was trading of images for more images. I don't think that we know, the court knows that every person that's sexually abused does not begin trading, viewing child pornography. This is not as simple as a viewing of a few images. Also, I noticed in the pre-sentence investigation report, when discussing drug abuse issues, and it appeared as though Mr. Mendoza had stated that in spite of negative impacts on his jobs and his ability to maintain jobs and attend jobs, he continued to do the drugs. That appears to me like someone who's not as willing to make a change in their life for the better when they're doing something that they know they should not be.
The prosecution argues for the maximum sentence of 7 years, emphasizing that while the defendant acknowledges his actions, he appears to shift blame rather than fully accept responsibility. The case is not merely about viewing illicit material, but involves actively storing, sharing, and trading it, which the prosecution sees as an aggravating factor. They dismiss the idea that past trauma alone led to these actions, noting that not all abuse victims engage in such behavior. Additionally, concerns are raised about the defendant's history of drug use, highlighting a pattern of knowingly engaging in harmful activities despite negative consequences. The defense attempts to clarify aspects of his relationship with his underage fiancée, asserting that it was supervised and with parental approval, but this does little to counter the prosecution's stance on the severity of the charges.
He himself, based on his prior experience, should, as a child, which is unfortunate because that shouldn't happen to anyone, he should know firsthand what these children are going through, and in my opinion should have been even more sensitive to those types of images rather than using them or blaming his childhood as why he's viewing those images. Further, Your Honor, I know this is not part of the case and her parents may be fully aware and okay with this relationship, but I do think that it is concerning that on top of viewing and trading child pornography, he is meeting someone who was at the time when they met underage online, may not have interacted with her in person a lot, but clearly have a relationship strong enough to have apparently proposed to her, someone younger than him who may be now of age at age 17. But I do think that that's something else that we should be concerned with going forward in the future. And so because of that, I don't feel this is a case that's good for probation, and I would be asking for prison time.
All right.
Thank you,
Defense.
Judge. I'm going to be asking for deferred adjudication, Judge. When we're talking about deferred adjudication versus regular probation, I think the most damning aspect of this is the fact that he's going to have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As we know, deferred in a case like this is not really like a deferred in any other sort of case, Judge. Just the mere fact that he's going to be registering as a sex offender for the rest of his life is going to be far more punishment than being a convicted felon. It's going to be a scarlet letter that follows him around for the rest of his life. Sending him to prison is not going to make anyone safer in this situation, Judge. Obviously, he has unresolved trauma, and even in the PSI, I believe it was on a scale of 1 to 10 for some child trauma scale. They said he was a 9 out of 10. So he did have a very traumatic childhood, as the state acquiesces to and agrees to. I'm not a psychiatrist, Judge. I can't say for certain why he's in the position that he is. Nobody can. I can't. The state can't. He's not saying, and he's never said that this is exactly why he's made the decisions to land himself in this position, but we can't ignore it, and I think it has to be some sort of a factor. He's, like I said, him going to prison is not going to make anybody safer. He's a very young man. He was just, above. He was just a few years when this investigation started from actually being a minor himself. I believe he was 19 or 20 years old. And so even if you gave him the max and the cap, he's still going to be a young man when he gets out. And he's not going to have addressed anything in his past to become a better person. I think what he needs, and is absolutely willing to do it, is any sort of the standard counseling that they have, any sort of therapy, Judge, to process the trauma that he went through as a child and understand the decisions and steps that led him to this position. And he's never said that that was exactly why it happened or that that's an excuse, but I do believe it's a factor that's mitigating and does need to be considered in this situation.
Oh, so we're just handing out deferred adjudications like participation trophies now? This guy didn't just trip and fall into a criminal lifestyle. He took a running leap with a head start. Acting like slapping a lifetime registry on him is somehow worse than actual prison time is like saying getting banned from Chuck E. Cheese is a harsher punishment than getting locked up. He had enough presence of mind to trade illegal content and propose to an underage girl. But now, suddenly he's too fragile for consequences? Nah, let's not pretend therapy alone is going to flip this guy into a model citizen. Some people need a timeout, behind bars.
He cooperated fully with law enforcement, Judge. I would take it as a grain of salt. Anything in the PSI that appears to be Mr. Mendoza minimizing his guilt, and because there is that bit on the PSI that says this is just a summary, this is not a word for word situation. Every time I've met with Mr. Mendoza, he's never minimized his guilt in any form, and his plan is not to minimize it here with you today. Like I said, he cooperated with law enfortement. He gave them all the credentials to his online accounts so that they could assume them for further investigations. Because of that, Judge, his childhood, his remorse, and I believe that it would be the best outcome for society if he is actually able to process that, understand the decisions that led him to be in this position, become a better person. Like I said, whether it's prison time or probation, he's still going to be basically a young man with most of his life in front of him whenever that comes about. So we're asking for deferred adjudication, and actually my client prepared a statement for the court if you would give him the opportunity to read that to you.
Sure. Any objections?
No.
Honorable Judge Boyd, today I approach your cell with utmost respect and remorse for my actions. As of November 5th, 2023, I have been incarcerated for 7 months in the Bexar County Adult Detention Center. Since my incarceration, I have learned the strict understanding of the severity of my case and have been physically harmed 3 times since. I have grown terrified of being in jail and fear prison would be worse on my mind and my life. My childhood has been stripped away from me since I was age 9, and I would require counseling because I never got to talk about it and feel that this is why I made my mistakes. So I come before the courts respectfully asking for your consideration granting me probation and not prison. My family and I agree that I may need the maximum probation allowed and a 180-day sanction with limitations on what I can do. Given my record, I will be a model probationee attending all classes assigned in order to become a successful member of society. I will never be the same mentally after my incarceration. I will never return to the mistakes I have made. My goals going forward in life are to be a culinary expert and chef and get a small business degree to own a food truck/restaurant. I am not a burden to my community. I am a taxpayer, and prior to my arrest, I was an assistant manager at my local restaurant. I have a family wishing for my safe return home without bodily injuries. So in conclusion, you granted probation by you, Judge. You will witness that you are not going to be making any mistake. I am in full agreement for mental therapy/counseling classes and other stipulations that may be added, but they will be followed to the T and fulfilled with great expectation. Thank you, Judge, for listening to my statement.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Mendoza, I want you to know that I always read everything. I'm not the one who accepted this plea, but I did read over the stipulations and everything, and I have listened to the argument of your attorney, listened to the argument of the state, and understand your trauma and what you've gone through. And I'm sorry that you've gone through that. I'm a firm believer that when people go to do their time, be it at the Bexar County Jail or if it's at prison, they should not be subjected to violence, because the answering for those charges are what happens in court. The prison is just the conclusion or the result of that, where you do your time, and people should leave people alone, and people should not be attacking people at the Bexar County Jail or at the prison. People should be able to go to the prison, go to the jail, do their time in peace, and hopefully learn what their triggers are, hopefully address the traumas that are in their life. But the problem is when people go to the Bexar County Jail and when people go to prison, everybody, well, not everybody, some people are at the jail and at the prison dealing with their own traumas, and their own traumas present themselves in attacking other people. It presents themselves in not knowing the normal way that things should run in society, or the helpful way that things should run in society. Then you have some people who are at the jail, some people are at the prison. They're just people who sole entertainment in life, their sole purpose that they see in life is just to prey upon others. I wish that when I would send people to prison and I would send the people to the Bexar County Jail, that they would get a chance to reflect on why they're there and reflect on bettering themselves and not having to reflect on watching their back. My concern in your case is the trading. That's a problem. So I'm going to deny your application. I'm going to find you guilty of counts 1, 2, and 3. And I understand that the state is asking for a cap of 7, but I understand the trauma you've gone through, and you can't go undo that. You can never get your childhood back. And who knows, maybe you would have been a different person if none of that had happened. But I'm taking that in consideration with sentencing you, okay? All right, so the court will sentence you to 6 years in each count. The counts are to run concurrently. There's Chapter 62 compliance. And I'm going to ask that at the prison, they place you in the mental health unit. They do have persons that will help you with your mental health. They do have persons that will help you with the therapeutic community. I'll request for the therapeutic community as well, but I don't know if you're going to qualify for that. Even though I'm requesting that in my judgment, in my order, you're still going to have to ask for it. You understand? If you do not ask for it, they're definitely not going to consider it. And it's just going to be like, I never ordered it. Okay. All right. I'm going to show you what's entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal. Did you review that with your attorney? Did you understand it? And did you sign it? All right. Because this is a plea bargaining agreement, because I followed your plea bargaining agreement, and because you waive your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Because this is a felony conviction, you're not allowed to own or possess any weapons or ammunition. If you have a question over what a weapon or ammunition is, you'll need to speak to an attorney. Do you understand? All right, good luck to you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Yes, thank you.
Well, what a spectacle we have here. We've got Mr. Mendoza, who's apparently mastered the art of life is tough. So let's talk about it while I beg for probation, claiming he's learned the severity of his case after 7 months of being physically harmed. Oh, the drama. Then there's the heartfelt promise to be a culinary genius and food truck mogul, because nothing says I'm a reformed citizen like dreams of flipping burgers while trading child pornography. The cherry on top? The judge, bless their heart, offers a sympathetic ear, suggesting a nice little mental health stay at the prison spa, complete with therapy and the therapeutic community treatment. Oh, and let's not forget that our dear Mr. Mendoza is now a taxpayer. What a wholesome citizen, who's just here trying to avoid those pesky jailhouse bullies. What a plot twist.